The transaction takes less than a second. A card taps, a light blinks, a receipt prints. Money moves instantly, but it doesn't move freely. Behind nearly every purchase is a network you never chose, a system you were never asked to understand. Visa Inc. does not lend money. It does not hold deposits. It does not carry the kind of risk banks are built to manage. And yet it controls how money moves between them. In the United States alone, it handles more than half of all debit transactions. Across the world, it processes trillions of dollars every year. It sits between buyer and seller, bank and merchant, trust and transaction, and it collects a fee every time. That position wasn't earned through competition. It was engineered. In 1958, Bank of America launched Bank Americard, a mass-mailed credit card sent to thousands of consumers, many of whom had never borrowed money before. It was reckless. Fraud rates exploded almost immediately. Unauthorized charges flooded the system. Losses mounted so quickly that most banks would have shut it down. But Bank of America didn't. Because beneath the chaos was a realization. If consumers could be trained to use credit, the scale would be limitless. The problem wasn't demand. It was infrastructure. No single bank could build a system large enough to support nationwide spending. So instead of competing, they changed the game entirely. They invited other banks in. Bank of America began licensing Bank Americard to other banks in the late 1960s. That decision looks simple in hindsight. At the time, it was radical. Banks weren't supposed to share systems. They weren't supposed to cooperate at scale. But this wasn't framed as cooperation. It was framed as expansion. Each bank issued its own cards, managed its own customers, took its own risk. But all of them ran on the same network. That created something unprecedented. A system where competitors were no longer building separate products. They were reinforcing the same one. By 1970, the network had grown too large to be controlled by a single bank. So control was transferred into a consortium owned by participating banks. In 1976, it was renamed Visa. Not a product, not a bank, a shared system. And once that system reached critical mass, it became self-sustaining. Most people think a card transaction is simple. It isn't. When you tap your card, 4 parties are involved. The issuing bank, the acquiring bank, the merchant, and the network. Visa sits in the middle of all of them. It routes the transaction, verifies the connection, enforces the rules. But the most important part isn't the movement of money, it's the pricing of it. Every transaction includes an interchange fee, set within the network structure and paid by the merchant's bank to the cardholder's bank. Visa doesn't publicly set this fee directly, but it defines the framework that determines it. That distinction matters, because it allows Visa to claim neutrality while controlling the environment where pricing is decided. To a regulator, it looks like a network facilitating transactions. To a merchant, it feels like a system setting prices. And that difference is where Visa operates. Once a merchant accepts Visa, they don't just accept a payment method. They accept a contract, a set of rules that cannot be negotiated individually. One of the most powerful is known as the Honor All Cards rule. If a business accepts Visa, it must accept every Visa card. Not just the basic ones, not just the low-cost ones, all of them. That includes premium cards with higher fees, rewards cards with elevated interchange, corporate cards with entirely different cost structures. The merchant doesn't get to choose. They either accept the system or they don't participate at all. That removes something fundamental from the market: choice. And without choice, pricing stops being competitive. It becomes standardized. On the surface, Visa has competitors. MasterCard operates a similar network. American Express runs its own closed-loop system. But the dynamics aren't what they appear. Visa and MasterCard don't compete the way traditional companies do. They operate parallel systems with similar structures, similar incentives, and overlapping participants. Many of the same banks issue cards on both networks. That means the entities that should be driving competition are aligned across platforms. It doesn't eliminate competition entirely, but it changes its nature. Instead of competing to lower costs, the system competes to expand usage. And expansion benefits everyone inside it. In 1998, the US government stepped in. The Department of Justice filed an antitrust case against Visa and MasterCard. The accusation focused on exclusivity rules. Banks were restricted from issuing cards for competing networks like American Express. The government argued this limited competition, and they were right. The court ruled against Visa. The restrictions were lifted. Banks were allowed to work with competitors. It looked like a turning point. It wasn't, because the ruling addressed behavior, not architecture. The system remained intact. The incentives remained aligned, and the network continued to grow. By the early 2000s, the scale of the system had become impossible to ignore. Merchants began pushing back. They argued that interchange fees were artificially high, that they were being forced into a system where costs were dictated, not negotiated. In 2005, a massive class action lawsuit was filed. Millions of merchants, billions of dollars at stake. The claim was direct. Visa and its partners had created a system that fixed prices and restricted competition. Years of litigation followed. Experts testified. Internal documents were examined. The mechanics of the system were dissected in court. Eventually, a settlement was reached worth billions. But once again, the structure survived. Because even when the system is challenged successfully, changing it risks destabilizing everything connected to it. Today, the strategy is more refined. Control doesn't require exclusion. It requires influence. In recent years, regulators have accused Visa of using agreements and incentives to discourage merchants and partners from adopting alternative payment networks. Not through outright bans, but through economics. If using a competitor becomes slightly less attractive, slightly less efficient, slightly more expensive, most participants won't switch. And that's enough. Because dominance doesn't need to be absolute. It just needs to be maintained. Visa is no longer just a company. It's embedded into global commerce. Banks depend on it to issue cards. Merchants depend on it to accept payments. Consumers depend on it for daily transactions. Removing it isn't a simple regulatory action. It's a systemic disruption. Courts recognize this. Regulators recognize this. And that recognition creates a boundary. Not a legal one, a practical one. Because even if the system has flaws, breaking it could cause something worse. And that possibility protects it. The system doesn't feel imposed. It feels natural, convenient, fast, reliable, That's what makes it effective, because the most powerful systems don't force participation. They make participation unavoidable. Visa doesn't need to dominate visibly. It only needs to remain invisible and essential. Every transaction reinforces it. Every swipe strengthens it. Every tap expands it. And the more it grows, the harder it becomes to question. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like infrastructure. And once something becomes infrastructure, it stops being challenged. That's the part you were never supposed to notice.